Hello, I'm Vincent Viviana, and this is my video journal for the web security module in the SMT program. I covered several core topics in the web security, including the difference between HTTP and HTTPS, and the OAuth subtype and common vulnerabilities such as SQL injection, XSS, and the others. Among all of this, the SSRF stood out as the concept I wanted to explore further. So the SSRF is considered dangerous because it can expose a system's internal network, which cloud metadata service, access sensitive data, and ultimately lead to credential theft. These four consequences are make SSRF particularly severe compared to the other vulnerabilities. So the underlying issue comes down to trust. When the user input is not properly validated, the user ends up trusting that input, which allows a request to move from something harmless to something that exposes internal systems. This is the core logic between why SSRF works in the first place. And one concept that stood out to me is that the server side validation acts as a form of access control. When a server validates a user input before processing a request, it can prevent unauthorized access to internal resources. However, without a proper validation, attackers may exploit the server through vulnerabilities such as SSRF. This is formally documented as CWE-918. The definition is straightforward. A web server receives a URL from the upstream component and retrieves its contents without confirming that the request is going to the destination it was intended for. In short, an uncontrolled URL combined with the absence of validations allowed the server to reach internal resources it should never expose. To understand how this theoretical vulnerability plays out in practice, I look at the 2019 Capital One cyber incident. At this high level, the attack moved through five stages. It began with an SSRF vulnerability, which was used to reach the metadata service, which in turn to expose temporary credentials, which provides access to cloud storage, and which finally resulted in a large-scale data breach. And looking more closely at how this unfolded, the attacker exploited an SSRF vulnerability combined with the misconfigured web application firewall. This combination allowed requests to be relayed to the AWS EC2 metadata service. Because the metadata service returned the temporary IAM credentials, the attacker gained valid and if short-lived permissions interact with the AWS environment. Using those credentials, the attacker was able to lease and access AWS S3 buckets and from there exfiltrate a significant volume of data. Each stage depend entirely on one before it. Without the SSRF, the WAF misconfiguration would not have been reachable, and without the exposed credential, the S3 buckets would not have been accessible at all. The incident ultimately affected approximately 106 million individuals, making it one of the most significant breaches tied to a single technical weakness in recent years. So this case demonstrates that a single unvalidated URL can become the starting point of a large-scale cybersecurity breach. Studying the Capital One incident made this topic more memorable than the other vulnerabilities I reviewed because it illustrates how a technical concept translates into measurable real-world consequences. Seeing the connection between each stage of the attack chain helped me understand not only what SSRF is, but why validation and access control matter at every layer of a system. So that's it for this journal. Thank you for watching.